Hello, everybody. Welcome to the first episode of the Starlight Book Club. My name is Autumn Chu, and
I'm
that's
Kelly Liu.
okay. There you go. I cut you off because I wasn't sure if you would figure it out. But yes, today we are reading a book called An Absolutely Remarkable Thing. We've never done this before, but I've decided without Kelly's input that I'm going to start every episode by rating the book that we just read. So, and I rate An Absolutely Remarkable Thing a 10 out of 10, which um and I need to explain this in a little bit more detail because I'm very particular about how I rate books.
Mhm.
Here's how I like to summarize it. If I read a book and it has no technical flaws from beginning to end, it's engaging, I like the characters, it's well plotted, everything about the book is perfect and sound, and I enjoyed reading it, and I have no critique whatsoever, it gets a 9 out of 10. That is kind of
Mhm.
this the way in which my rating system works. And for every like
Okay.
technical misstep that I see, so for example, I think the writing style has some problems, or there's like some things that the characters do that don't make sense, or there's like a plot hole or something. There's like minor deductions that I take from that. But
Uh-huh.
the sort of like craft of writing a book is the first 9 points, and the last point is
Okay.
basically, uh, does this book teach me something that I didn't know before about humanity? Like, did I learn something about
Mm.
myself or people as a whole by reading this book?
Mhm.
Uh,
Mhm.
and I think that's kind of like the metric that I use to analyze literature, because I think the whole point of like books and reading is to it's to understand ourselves better. It's to try, because people are confusing. We don't understand ourselves. We certainly don't understand other people. And so anything that we
Mhm.
can do to make us understand ourselves a little bit better is like worth talking about and worth creating.
Mm. I
Yeah.
like that. I really
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah. So anyway, An Absolutely Remarkable Thing gets a 10 out of 10 for me. Uh because it's very technically sound. I like the style, I like the plotting, I like the characters, and I feel like I learned a lot about kind of like the nature of fame, I guess, but beyond that, sort of like I think it captures something essential about human nature as made manifest in the internet age that hasn't been done before, or at least not that I know of. Um, and in some
Mm.
ways, I almost feel like authors are like kind of afraid to tackle that sometimes because speaking as someone who writes periodically, like um, the temptation is generally to engage with things that you have already seen and already know. So, like, I mean, an obvious example is like fantasy and sci fi, where it's like the same fantasy and sci fi tropes come up again and again because it's difficult, both from a creative standpoint, like it's hard to creatively come up with stuff, but also it's difficult from like a psychological standpoint to do something that's very, very new and very different from what has come before. Uh, and I think in setting out to capture like this quality of the internet age of fame, it is, I think it's done really well. I think Hank has done something remarkable by taking something that is unique to our time that has never been covered before and rendering it in a way that is literarily beautiful. I think that's really hard to do, and but he's done it, and so it gets a 10 out of 10 from me.
Mm. Mhm.
Yeah.
I think how I don't usually rate books, but if I had to, I would go with 9 out of 10. I'd say
Oh,
let's go with 9.5 out of
okay.
10. I
Interesting.
think I do. So this is my second time reading the book,
Yes.
and I don't usually reread books because I read slow, and mentally I don't usually enjoy reading something that I already know, where I already know what
Of
happens.
course. Yeah.
But thinking back to the first time I read it, I think definitely agree that it's something that I think only Hank Green can write, being chronically online, always with the trends of social media and the internet. Like you said, he writes about fame in a way that only someone who is famous and actively thinks about how to use that fame can write
Yes.
about that experience, and it's also just such a timely and relevant story given our current society and culture. And I feel like Hank Green is the only person who can write that.
Yeah, and we mentioned this in the notes channel that we have. By the way, this is all taking place on Discord. We have a channel where we put all of our book notes and stuff. Uh, I forgot which between the two of us who said it, but one of us said something about how like this is. I think this is what I said. So sorry, I'm hijacking your point, but
Very good.
Hank Green. Okay, so let me give you like a little bit of background for this book. This is the debut novel of Hank Green, who, if I don't know how you possibly could be listening to this podcast and also don't know who Hank Green is, but just in case, he's an extremely famous YouTuber and uh I guess business owner. Like he runs like 4 different YouTube channels. He made
Science
VidCon, if you know what VidCon
communicator.
is. Science communicator, yes, he's on TikTok. He was on an episode of The Yard, which is very exciting for me because I love that show. Um, and he also wrote 2 books. So this is like a side project
Oh,
of a
also,
man whose life is just a series of wildly successful side projects, I feel like.
yes. Also, perhaps critically, he is the brother of young adult novelist John
Oh
Green,
yeah.
who is now not just a young adult novelist
Yeah.
anymore.
So, and his brother is like a novelist. He told this joke on The Yard that I'm gonna steal and reuse, where like
Mhm.
people would come up to him and be like, "Hey, I love your book. Thanks so much for writing that." And he was like, "Oh no, you're thinking of my brother." And then he thinks about it and he's like, "Wait, no, I did write a book. That's crazy." Um,
And people on in the news still call Hank Green brother of John Green, I think.
that's so funny. That's awesome. Um, Well, anyway, he's written a book. It's very good, which is a pleasant surprise because most of the time when people who don't write books write a book, it's not very good. But this was a really good book. So
It's
yeah,
very well done, yes.
and like we mentioned before, it's about fame, and specifically, it's about a girl named April May who finds the first of many weird statues, and she becomes kind of like the conduit through which humanity experiences these statues. And I guess minor spoiler alert, so click off if you don't want to get spoiled, I guess. But they turn out to be alien-esque. And so she's basically the human that's made first contact with aliens, which is
Can we
cool.
pull up the meme of the aliens meme?
I'll edit that in post. It's gonna kill the tempo if I do
Perfect.
it live. Um, but yeah. Uh, okay. And so I also didn't talk about this Kelly beforehand, but I think what I would like to do is the first like 20 to 30 minutes of this show will be talking about the book in a way that is a little bit more vague and a little bit more like you would like this if XYZ and without spoilers. And then after a certain point, we'll be like, okay, now it's like spoiler time, and we get into the nitty gritty of like things that happen in the book that are really substantial. And it's for people who have read it. So this opening section is if you haven't read the book, this is our chance to sell you on it. And then later in the episode, we're going to be like, now if you haven't read it yet, go read it before you finish this. Does that is
Sounds
that
good.
is that cool with you,
Yeah.
Kelly?
Yes.
Yeah, we didn't talk about
Sounds
this a
perfect.
whole lot before. We just kind of hit record and started
I
going.
was meaning to ask you, how do you want to structure this
Yeah,
podcast?
no,
So
don't worry about it.
this
The,
is
the
great.
cool thing about me is that I've done improv for a really long time, so I can just start talking
Perfect.
and I'll just carry it. So don't worry. Just react to what I
Sounds
say,
good.
interject when feels appropriate, and everything will
I
be fine.
can do that all day.
Hell yeah. Okay, so the sort of premise of the book, like I said, is that she finds these aliens, and crucially, she makes YouTube videos about them, April May. And she does this with her friends. She's got her girlfriend named Maya. She's got her other friend named Andy, who's kind of just the third wheel. And then she meets this other girl named Miranda, who is like a scientist who kind of Miranda is almost like a plot character where it's like her function in the book is to know a bunch of things that the main characters don't know and apply that knowledge in important ways. and like she kind of has a personality, but she's a very like functional character. I don't think we really get to get in touch with her inner world so much.
That's accurate, I would say. I didn't think about that. That's
Yeah,
very accurate.
and I think well, I have to cough. I muted myself so you didn't have to hear that. Um, I was going to say something. Oh, yeah. So, this is a sci fi book in the sense that science-y and space-y things happen in the book. It's also not like hard sci fi, it doesn't take place on a different planet or anything, but it's kind of, I guess you would call it speculative fiction. It's like, it's a new kind of like science-y weird twist applied to the world that as we know it. And that's really important because the sort of like core crux of the books, I think, is that the thing that makes or the interesting thing that happens is not really the aliens themselves coming onto Earth, it's how humanity reacts to them. And in
Mhm.
particular, the book is very sort of like the central theme of the book is basically that April and Andy are making like YouTube videos about these alien creatures. And by like making these YouTube videos, because they were the first one to like make contact, they become really famous off of this, and it becomes kind of like it's almost like how the Haktua girl, like she made like one funny joke ish on like a show on like a newscast or something, and then it went super viral, everyone was talking about it, and then she like leveraged it to become like somehow a mini celebrity, and then she made like a big a cryptocurrency that like scammed a bunch of people out of money. I don't know what happened after that, but it's the same sort of mechanism of like someone got famous. April May got famous by just sort of like being in the right place at the right time and going viral for something and then like riding that fame for a while. Uh, in ways that frankly don't really make sense. Like the whole I think one of the core themes of the book is how like April May doesn't do anything. She's just a personality. Like someone like John Green, for example, like he is famous because he wrote several very, very good YA novels, and he had a long form YouTube channel that with Hank Green, of course, that has done a huge amount of good in the world, and he keeps like reinvesting his time and money and attention into making the world a better place over and over again. And these are great things. Whereas someone like Hawk Tuah Girl is kind of like, why do you have a podcast? What do you have to say that is of interest to me? And I don't mean this to like shit on her like too badly. It's like maybe she is really interesting. I don't know. I haven't seen the podcast, but it's like the sort of through line. Okay, here's how I'm going to say. I think as a society, we like to pretend that there's some kind of correlation between how famous someone is and how much value they provide to society. That would be nice if the most famous people in the world were also the people who, like, they got famous for good reasons. Like, they wrote books, or they're really good actors and actresses who, like, make people feel things. Or, I don't know, like, they're big philanthropists or something. Um, but some people are kind of famous just because like of something weird that happened to them, like Haktua Girl. And April May is more in that category where it's like it's unclear the value she actually provides to society, at least in the beginning of the book. Um, I don't think I have a point. I think I'm just
For
talking.
the end.
Yeah, so in the second half we will talk about how that changes because that does flip at some point. But I guess the first talking point is sort of like the nature of fame and like how how people become famous and what people become famous for, and like the mechanism
How
by
it
which.
changes them.
Yeah, yeah, what do you think? I just talked for like 5 minutes straight.
No, you're good. Yeah, I think the most interesting thing to me was just April's self-awareness of
Mhm.
how fame affects her, what she wants from it, why she wants it, and knowing that it's not necessarily, I wouldn't say moral, but like, what's the word I'm looking for? Not like the most justified
Mhm.
or the most. what's the word? What's the word related to justified that I'm thinking
I
of?
think I think what you're trying to say is that like there's not a good reason why this happened to her, and that's a thing that keeps coming
Yeah.
up for the characters over and over again.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, it's not like the most logical thing.
mhm,
Like she knows it's not like, or like she is aware of the pitfalls of being famous, and yet she cannot resist the allure of being famous.
yeah, yeah, and a big thing that keeps coming up in the book over and over again is she keeps saying like, uh, how do I explain this? The book is written from her perspective as a retrospective. So as you're reading the book, April May is telling you the story of what happened from her perspective, but from the perspective of her in the future when she's sort of reflecting on how it all went down and what she regrets and what she would have done differently. And a consistent thing she keeps saying over and over again is that she almost like deluded herself into thinking that she was more important than she actually is, or she was doing good for the world when she really wasn't. And so, a really good example of this is in her relationship with another major character whose name I cannot pronounce for the life of me. It's Peter something.
Petrowicki.
Petrowicki. Thank you.
Peter Petrowicki.
Yeah, I would never have been able to do that. Thank you. Um,
I only know that because I listened to part of the audiobook.
That's smart. That's good. That's really helpful. Peter Petrowicki. And so Peter Petrowicki is a character who is a foil to April, not her opposite exactly, but basically over the course of the book, April develops a kind of narrative around these aliens that they are essentially good. They're essentially benevolent to humanity, whereas Peter takes the opposite position, which is that they are bad or dangerous. Uh, and the amount it's actually a very interesting commentary on like how conservative news outlets talk, where it's like he sometimes he will not actually outright say they are dangerous. He will just be like, well, they might be dangerous, so we should be careful. But usually like when you say like this might be dangerous, so we should be careful, what ends up happening is that people treat it as if it's dangerous, and then for all intents and purposes it is dangerous because it's having that effect on people. It creates an air of paranoia, etc., etc. um
Hmm.
so anyway, uh these two characters have very opposed views of what the aliens are like and what they do. And they sort of like create their own factions, which end up being called the Dreamers for April May and the Defenders for Peter Petrowicki. And basically, these two factions are kind of split on whether or not the aliens are here to help us or hurt us. And a very, very important part of this book that I haven't quite explained yet is that these alien creatures, they don't actually do anything. They show up. um in fact, technically there might just be one of them. It's hard to explain, but basically it's just a statue. It's a statue with impossible physical properties that sits there in the middle of population centers and doesn't move, doesn't interact with anything. You can't move it no matter how hard you try because it's super heavy. And what's also fun is that if you dig out the floor underneath it, it just stays floating in the air. So it kind of just like you just can't interact with it in a lot of ways. Um, and so it's kind of unsettling because you're like, what is this thing doing here? Why is it like it's kind of like having a clown statue in your room where it's like, I know it's
Yeah.
not going to move and it's not going to do anything, but I don't like that it's there and it feels like it's looking at me. That's kind of what the
Hmm.
aliens in this book are like.
Especially because you don't know where it comes from, why it's here,
Exactly.
what are their intentions.
Yeah, there's no explanation for the vast majority of the book of what these aliens are here for. Um, and this is on purpose, I think, because what is so interesting about this book is how these characters react to what to the aliens' appearance, and the split between an optimistic sort of like these aliens want humanity to work together versus these aliens probably want to destroy us, you know? Um, that is the that's kind of like the core tension of the book, and how the characters react to the alien coming down. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's also just a very obvious parallel to how our current world exists and works.
Say more about that.
Um, just the sense of inducing fear in everyone around perceived threats, I guess,
Mm. As
whether or
we,
not
at time of recording, another person in my city, Minneapolis, just got shot by ice. And so that's kind
the
of
second one, third one.
I think this is the second one, which is pretty bad.
Ugh,
One was bad enough. Um,
one was bad enough.
yeah. And that's kind of like, ah, that is kind of the point the book is making, I guess. Like, it's in the real world, the current most salient example is fear of like migrants, I suppose, and also racism, obviously, people who are of a different skin color than white. We're both Asian, as you can probably tell by the art style. Um, but yeah, it's I want to say that Hank, like, the sort of easy thing to say is that Hank Green is like, well, he's prophetic for like predicting that people will
Mhm.
leverage sensationalist things to like invoke fear and then control politics. It's like,
Yeah,
I
so
mean,
for the
he didn't.
record, this book was published in 2018.
Yeah, yeah. So 8 years ago at time of recording, and it's like, uh, so like in a sense, yes, he predicted that this would happen, but also this was already happening in 2018. So it's like it wasn't
Hmm.
that crazy. It's like it's not that crazy, but it is kind of like a theme that's going to come up again and again. And like I
Hmm.
said, like that's something that I think the book explores um, in a way that is really useful. And another thing that sort of happens in this book is that one of the big sort of themes that April May keeps coming back to over and over again is the way in which her own psychology is warped by her position as the leader of this movement of the Dreamers, where,
Hmm.
um, hang on, there's like a bunch of examples of this. I'm trying to pick the best one. There's sort of
Hmm.
like so April May feels very pressured to participate in the culture of being very inflammatory about the other side, so to speak, where she starts to like demonize the defenders in her head and sort of like how do you say this? She stops at some point. She kind of stops engaging with any valid points they might make of, but like maybe the aliens actually are kind of dangerous, which is honestly like a fair assessment. It's like we don't know what these creatures are, we don't know what's going on, maybe caution would be a good idea. But at the same time,
Yeah.
it's like Peter comes off as unlikable, and I think the reader sort of intended to disagree with him on the basis that he's leveraging that so-called how would you say it, um like a very reasonable amount of caution that would make sense in the mouth of another character comes off as very
Hmm.
distasteful when he presents it, because he kind of seems to be leveraging it for the sake of inciting a lot of hatred and arguing among people, which is also very profitable for him. um,
Hmm.
and so April
And on
May,
April's side,
yes,
yeah, so on April's side, that becomes her sole mission is to counterbalance that, and her sole mission is to promote the side of, oh no, like he's completely wrong and you shouldn't fear these things. They're benign, they're
yeah,
friendly,
hmm,
they're here for the good of the world, even though, like you said, like maybe it is wise to stop and think and
hmm,
consider the alternatives and proceed with caution. But
yeah, and in
throughout that whole
mhm,
process, her goal is to be the opposite. And
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, and the
go ahead.
sort of like the very interesting thing that the book makes a point of is that um April didn't necessarily believe these things before Peter became very popular and started disagreeing with her. Like before he took off, she also was kind of like not really sure what to make of the aliens, but once the narrative started to form that the aliens might actually be hostile, she felt very pressured to create the counter narrative of actually no, they're benevolent. And she didn't really start believing that until like she had to, if that makes sense. Um, and this is, I think, like a very like, how do I say this? I see this happen a lot in my peer groups or perhaps internet spaces. And
Mhm.
for context, I'm a transgender woman who spends a lot of time on the internet, which is an extremely common combination. Um, and so I've been exposed to like so many different kinds of like queer discourse and queer rhetoric and some such and things like that. Um, and uh, as I'm down with the cause, obviously, but I do think that queer people tend to run into the same problem that April May runs into, which is that once you once you have opposition, once you have someone who disagrees with you or is promoting a view you don't like, you feel the urge to simplify your position and your opinions about things, to make the strongest point possible, because a simple narrative is just so much easier to present and understand. um, so, for example, with the sort of the validity of the gender identity of trans women or whatever, like the slogan of like trans women are women, it's the simplest possible version of this take. I think I might be stealing this point from ContraPoints now that I think about it, but I'm just going to keep talking anyway. Uh, you say just the simplest version of trans women are women because you feel like you need that simplicity as almost like a sword to cut through the other side's morass of awful, terrible things that they're saying about you, that like trans women are not valid, that your gender identity is not real, or you're always going to be a man, etc., etc. Um, and so I understand that, like, I understand where that impulse comes from. But at the same time, I think that if you sort of like focus too much on that, like, if you, I think anytime you simplify anything in the world down to that level, you're inevitably going to lose a ton of nuance. And in the case of being
Mhm.
transgender specifically, like, I believe that trans women are women, but I also believe that trans women by and large have a very, very different set of experiences than cis women do, which I think is not that crazy of a thing to say. And I think like
Mhm.
the particular ways in which those experiences have manifest are like worth talking about. Like, it's worthwhile for trans women and people who talk to trans women to engage with like how our experiences have been different, because in those differences lies a really important part of us that I just don't think we should get rid of, and I think trying to get rid of it will do more harm than good.
Mm, mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, the simplification just does a disservice to everyone.
Mhm. Yeah. um and so the book kind of has this the book deals with a similar theme in a different context, where the simplification that's happening is the narrative about why the aliens are here. By the way, the aliens are all called Carl. This is a thing in the book. So I'm going to
And I
just say
believe the title of the series is called The Carls.
that's crazy. That's so funny. The internet is such a
Let me
weird
fact check that.
place. um anyway, thank you for telling me that. Now I had to process that for a second. So anyway, the Carls.
Confirmed, it is called The Carls,
Great, thank you.
the
Uh,
book series.
yeah, yeah. The Carls are in a similar place where they have like our relationship to the Carls, whether we say that they're good or bad, it's like we get to observe in real time the narrative about the Carls shift and lose nuance as time goes on. Um, so for example, uh I don't know if I have an example of this actually. This book is so long. There's so many things that happen. Do you have
Mm.
anything to say while I go dig something up?
What can I say? I am not good at talking,
That's
so
okay. We're
let
practicing.
me think about that. We are practicing, and practice is the only way to get better. Um, hmm.
Maybe I should give you like an actual question. Uh,
Yeah, Yeah, let's do that.
That's
Maybe that'll
smarter.
help.
Um, okay, here I'm gonna start from farther away and then come back to what we were talking about before. How do you like April
Okay.
May as a character?
Ooh, that
It's a
is a
tough one.
good question.
Yeah,
That
it's
is a tough
interesting.
one.
Hmm.
Yeah, no,
Well,
it's like
actually, even before we
so.
get to whether or not you like her, tell me,
mm,
why don't you tell me about her as a person?
Sure. So April May, she's a 23-year-old graphic designer graduate.
Mhm.
Her girlfriend and their friend Andy,
The
they were
girlfriend's name
all
is
classmates
Maya,
in
just to
college.
as a reminder. Yeah.
Maya, yes,
Mhm.
yes. Maya and Andy, they were classmates with April
Mhm.
in college, and they just became a solid group through a group project.
Yeah. And how would you
And
describe like her personality? Like, yeah.
um, I would say on the surface, she seems put together, self assured, knows who she is, but you see throughout the book from basically the first chapter that she is, in fact, very complicated and very insecure as a person
Yes.
through reasons that I wish she elaborated on
Hmm.
because I want to understand where her insecurity comes from because she is very
Hmm.
clear that she grew up in a very stable family. Her parents are very supportive and loving, and yet she feels unworthy
Hmm.
in the world. And as someone who has grown up with that feeling and but very much knows where it comes from, I am deeply curious how she got there herself.
That is a really good question. Yeah. Which is not the direction
And
that I said I was going to come back to the thing I was talking about before, but maybe we'll just leave that behind.
mhm,
But to
sure.
wrap it up, it's like, um, the book is about fame and narratives and how narratives change over time. The narrative gets simplified. I think I solidified that point actually. I think that's fine. The narrative around the Carls starts. It gets split into the camps of Carl good and Carl bad, and the fact that that split happens is itself interesting because it is a reflection of the way that things do happen in our current media all the time.
Yeah, and how people
Finn,
process
yes.
information.
Yeah. Okay. Finn. Chapter closed. New chapter. Talking about April May's
Okay.
insecurities.
Yes.
Do you feel comfortable sharing? You said like you know what made you insecure. Do you feel comfortable
Mhm.
sharing that or like a piece of that with the internet?
Sure. So, as Autumn mentioned, we were both Asian. I
We
grew
are.
up in an child of two immigrants. They were not necessarily the same stereotypical tiger mom, tiger parents that may people may see on the internet.
Why don't you actually talk about what that stereotype is? Because not everyone is gonna know offhand, like that
Yeah,
cultural
that's a
context.
good
Mhm.
sure. That's a good point. I guess my understanding of the stereotypical Asian parent, tiger mom especially, is like they have full control over your schedule, who you talk no, not who you talk to, but just in terms of definitely
Sometimes. Yeah.
academics and
Mhm.
extracurriculars, they are very strict
Yeah.
on how much time do you spend on schoolwork, what extracurriculars do you do? They probably schedule you for after school classes, tutoring sessions, Saturday tutoring sessions, probably Chinese school or Japanese school, Korean school, if that exists. I'm sure it exists.
I'm sure it exists. Yeah.
Or church in my area. A lot of Koreans, the Korean population went to church, um, and just overall a very I don't know if controlling is the right word, but definitely controlling to an extent. And
Yeah.
they set very high expectations for what they want you to achieve as a student and as a person in life. So they expect you to be a doctor, lawyer, engineer, high paying, super academic careers.
Yeah, for sure.
And is there anything else I'm missing from the Tiger
I
mom, tiger
think
parent stereotype.
I think what I'll add is that all of this is very much centered on the goal of getting you into a good college. The reason why there's so much
Yes.
focus on how much time you spend on academics, and the reason why they are so tight with your extracurriculars is that they want to construct the best college application possible. So like if you're
To get into an Ivy League
yes, exactly. Uh
or
which
equivalent.
we did go to. We both went to Cornell,
Yes.
which is funny.
That is how we met.
So it kind of worked.
It did
Which
work.
is, that's the thing
It
about the
did for
Tigermons.
us.
That's the thing about the Tigermon strat. It low key kind of works. It's
Hmm.
the
But
problem.
at what
Yeah,
cost?
at what cost exactly? Because what happens after you're done with that process is that you go to college and then you realize, oh shit, I don't actually know who I am or what I want to do because my whole life was just trying to get into college. Now I'm in college and I'm like, well, now what?
Hmm.
So
And then
anyway,
after college, you're
yeah,
like, what do I do with my life?
exactly.
Who am I?
And those questions just haunt you forever and ever. The answer is start a podcast, I
Hmm.
guess. Um, so
Yeah, basically.
we got here by you talking about your insecurity because you relate to April May a lot as a character, right?
I would say, oh yeah, no, that's totally true. I definitely there's a lot of me that doesn't like how she acted, but I
Yeah.
also
Hmm.
do deeply relate to her, and a lot of that also
Yeah.
is just like me judging her from a sense of, oh, if I were in the same position, I
Hmm.
can totally see myself judging myself for
Mm.
doing probably
Yeah.
similar things. Hopefully not to that same extent,
Hmm.
because I don't think I have the conviction that she does as a
Yeah.
person.
It's very like cringe
But
core almost. It's like you watch her do things
yeah,
and it makes you cringe because you're like, ah, God, why are you doing this thing that's obviously a mistake?
absolutely,
But
yeah.
at the same time, you look at it and you're like, but the mistake she's making is just so like you just get it. You just know how she's
Hmm.
feeling. So it's like a good kind of
Yes,
cringe where it's like this is forcing me to
yeah.
confront like part of myself that I didn't know
Hmm.
about before. And like
Hmm.
a really good example of this is how she handles her relationship with Maya. So
Hmm.
do you want to take the explanation of what happens in the relationship, or should I do that?
I don't want to. I mean, I guess it's not really that much of a spoiler. Honestly, April is a very self-sabotaging person due to
Yeah, yeah,
her insecurities
hmm,
and pushes people she cares about away,
yeah.
including Maya,
There's a
and at some point, everyone.
one of my favorite lines from this book. I'm gonna see if I can dig it up quickly.
Mhm.
Uh, wow, we need a better system for taking notes about books.
Yeah, and I think we might want to work on having talking points and structured podcasts.
We could do that.
Um,
We could do that for sure.
yeah, but
Uh, there's a
first
part
time, first time, we're good.
there's a part of the book where her girlfriend asks her
Oh,
like where did this go?
are you
She
talking about the Pokemon song part?
yeah, she asks her like what are we basically? Like what is our relationship? And she just starts singing the Pokemon theme song and I was like that's really relatable. That is very funny. I would never do that, but I also understand where that impulse comes from.
Hmm. Hmm.
Uh wow. Yeah, I'll do a better job of organizing all these notes later. Um,
You're good.
but yeah. So she sabotage. She also just like straight up. Mm, is this a spoiler? Okay, we're slowly migrating into spoiler territory. So I mean, we're 40 minutes in.
Beware.
If you're at this point, hope you probably have decided whether or not you like this book. Um, so this will be like minor spoiler one, and we'll get into the deeper spoilers later. Uh, she straight up like breaks up with Maya partway through the book. Um, and the rationale behind the breakup is ostensibly that she's becoming so busy becoming famous off of the back of the Carl thing that she doesn't really have time for a relationship anymore. Uh, also the breakup is fucking awful. It's the worst breakup I've ever seen. It's like they're
Hmm.
basically in like a situationship where like they live together, but they're not together, but they do have sex and they do everything that a couple does except call themselves a couple. Uh,
Hmm.
and she basically says like, yeah, we're just roommates, so I'm just going to move out. And it's like, well, you're clearly not just roommates because you've been sleeping together and et cetera, et cetera. But anyway, um
Mhm.
the ostensible reasons because of the Carl thing. The actual reason, obviously, is because she has very, very deep attachment issues. And this is a manifestation of her insecurity. And this is something that you said in your notes as well. You said that you
Mhm.
relate to the feeling of being unworthy of being loved and like being
Mhm.
surprised that people care about you enough to keep you in their life. Do you want to like talk
Mhm.
more about that?
Um, yeah, yeah, we could do that. I
It's
guess
a
for
really
me,
vulnerable
that
question, I'm realizing actually. We don't have to, but it's like a good place to
no,
talk
you're
about
good.
feelings, I think.
No, yeah, I mean, I was very honest that I am. That is the thing that I can talk the most about is my feelings
LeMayo,
because I have
yeah,
a lot of them.
yes.
But yeah, for me, it's like kind of going back to like how I was raised and knowing why I'm an insecure person is like being raised with very high expectations. Like I had the freedom, some freedom to do what I want, but the expectations were always very clear about you need to do well in school, you need to get into a good college, you need to pick a financially stable and lucrative career so that you can guarantee a good life and financial stability for yourself.
Yeah, for sure.
And um in terms of relating to people, I think I was also raised with the mentality of always be productive, always be useful, and don't be a burden to other people.
Mm. I just realized,
So,
I'm so sorry. I just realized something really
yeah.
funny, which is that I have a button on, I have a keybind for Discord where if I press it, it will mute Discord, or mute myself on Discord so I don't like project like my coughing into the world. but but it doesn't work for OBS. So I've just been like hacking coughing into the microphone, and the microphone's just been picking up everything because this push to talk mute button doesn't actually do anything for the recording software I'm
Wait,
using.
I don't think I've registered anything.
No, you haven't because I've been muting myself on
Oh,
Discord, but I have not been
but
muting myself in the
OBS won't.
recording software. So that hacking is just
Oh,
in the
oops.
audio now. So
Oh, yikes.
uh
Oops.
whatever whatever horrible coughing sound I've made that was over what Kelly was saying before, I'm so sorry. That was terrible. Okay, back to what you were saying. You feel
Mhm.
like you've been raised with very high expectations, and that has now made you insecure because you feel like
Yes.
you need to provide value to people in order to,
Yes.
you know,
Be worthy of a place in this world.
yeah, yeah,
It
uh,
boils down to
mhm,
feeling guilt over my own existence.
yeah, for real.
So
Test.
yeah, so relating to what April said of just let me see if I can find that
Yeah, for sure.
note.
While you do that,
Um,
I am going to adjust my settings and
okay.
see if I can turn on a push to mute for OBS.
Hmm.
Test, test. Nope, that is not working.
Yeah, so the passage in the book, April is saying that deep down you dislike yourself enough that you cannot imagine anyone worthwhile actually wanting to be with you.
Yeah, that's the passage you sent.
And that is how I felt for so many years, and I think it's gotten better with therapy and all of that over the last few years, but it's still always surprises me still when I'll meet new people, or I think mostly when I meet new people and they are very open and friendly and want to include me in things, or even like right now at my new job, like people are so open and friendly and helpful and volunteer to give me information and give me resources. And I'm just still so surprised that people are genuinely that open, because also like I was raised with my mom specifically definitely has a mentality of you can't trust other people and the only people you can trust is your own immediate family. So it still surprises me when people are very genuine in wanting to be helpful to you and wanting you to have a good life, and
Yeah,
they
for
are
sure.
willing to help make your life better.
Mhm.
And just like even moving like from a very metropolitan area to the middle of nowhere upstate New York, and people are so much more open and trusting of each other, even if you're complete strangers, but you're like just new neighbors, and they bring you a bowl of fruit the day you move in. That's still so surprising to
Yeah.
me that
Mhm.
like there is goodness, that much goodness in people. And I think that really just ties back to the book as well. It's just you see so many examples of people being absolutely terrible to each other in the news, but then in certain pockets of the internet, like on Vlogbrothers, and then in real life, you're reminded that the capacity for humans to love and support each other is also still so big.
Yeah.
And I want for myself, and I think also the world, to reach a point where it is not something that's surprising anymore, but to still be grateful for it.
Yeah.
Because right now I'm surprised and grateful, but I want to reach a point where I am just grateful.
Interesting. Yeah. And what I'm trying, okay, the immediate question that comes to my head is why, but that's kind of a stupid way to say it. Like what is different about that? What's the difference between it being surprising? What is the difference between surprising and grateful versus just grateful? Like what does that mean for you psychologically if that were what does that shift represent for you?
I think that shift would mean feeling secure in myself and
Mhm.
my existence, and that I no longer have to justify my existence.
Mm, okay.
That I can accept that I am a part of this world, and I deserve it.
Yeah.
Or
And
like at least I don't need to prove it.
yeah. And that is like a very like Asian kid thing, I think. The feeling like you have to earn your keep almost. I remember when I was in therapy, I mean I've been in and out of therapy for a long time, but the first therapist I ever had, uh was basically saying something about how like he hopes at some point that I can understand how that like my parents' love for me is unconditional and they will always love me no matter what I do. And I remember thinking about that and being like, I literally just don't think that's true. Like I understand the value of believing that, but I mean, as an Asian queer kid, you just kind of know instinctively, and you've probably seen or heard about like parents who don't love their kids unconditionally, like literally just don't.
Mhm.
Like their love is
Mhm.
conditioned on them being straight and or financially successful and or academically successful. And once those things stop
Mhm.
happening, like the love actually does go away. Like it is not unconditional.
Mhm.
There are conditions to it.
Mhm.
Um, and it's kind of fucked up to grow up in that environment. And at this, okay, so now
Mhm.
we talked about ourselves for a long time. The thing that is so
Mhm.
interesting about April and how we started on this train is that her parents
Mhm.
do seem to love her unconditionally.
Mhm.
And like she makes a point of this where she says her parents have been supportive of pretty much everything she's ever done and just kind of want her to
Mhm.
be happy. So you're
Including
kind of
going to art school.
exactly, yeah. And you're kind of sitting there like, what made you insecure? Why are you like this? Because
Mhm.
it's so her experience is so different from yours and yet you've ended up in such a similar place.
Mhm.
Yeah,
So what is she not telling us about
exactly. Yeah.
her life that has led her to
Mhm.
feel this way?
I almost feel like insecure, it's a good question, honestly. It's a really good question. It's I this is gonna be like a bit of a tangent, but there's a streamer that
Mhm.
I like, who's also very famous. His name is Disguised Toast. It's a long story.
Mhm.
But he's like, I would say his the way he presents himself on the internet and in life is very introverted. Like he was very very clearly the quiet kid growing up, and now he's a streamer, which
Mhm.
is weird. But he's very smart and but very like soft spoken, very introverted. Uh, he's charismatic now after having been on the internet for so long, but you can kind of tell that that wasn't his default state for most of his life.
Mhm.
And he has, it's like occasionally his like family will just hop into like his streams, or they'll just you just get glimpses of his family, and his family is all like very chatty and open, and very like socially energetic, I guess. And you kind of look at that and you're like, how did Toast end up this way? Like, how did you become so introverted when you come from a family that's so extroverted? And maybe it's like a contrasts thing where
Mhm.
it's like his family took up so much space when they were talking when he was growing up that he never felt like comfortable like taking up space himself, or something like that.
Yeah.
Um, but it's interesting like trying to trace like people's trauma and things like that. uh I need to buy
Mhm.
time while I try to come up with an explanation for why April May is the way she is, but I will follow up by
Mhm.
in order to buy that time I will ask you, do you
Mhm.
feel like this difference or this absence of her character makes it harder for you to relate to her, or harder for you to like believe in her as a real character?
I don't think it makes it harder for me to believe in her.
Mm-hmm.
I think it does make it a little bit harder to relate to her
Mm,
in some ways, but I mean, I feel like I also can't, I am not in a position to judge her because I like, you can't judge anyone for like how they turned out and who they are
yeah.
and why they are the way they are,
Mm-hmm.
because that's just unfair.
Well, there's almost two layers to this question, right? Because like we're
Mhm.
talking about April May as if she's a real person almost, but she's also
Mhm.
not. She's like a fictional character
That is
created
true.
by Hank Green for the sake of making a
Mhm.
point. Uh,
Mhm.
and like,
And there's also like
yeah,
the April May that the narrator, and then also April May,
the
the
brand.
famous person that
Yeah,
she's
yeah, mhm.
creating.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So there's many, many layers to this. And so I think like what I'm asking you almost is like, from the standpoint of the construction of a book and of a character, do
Mm.
you feel
Okay.
like the lack of this part of her backstory is something I mean, we said at the beginning like you're at like a 9 or 9.5 out of 10. So there's
Mhm.
something missing.
Mhm.
Is this what you would say the missing thing is for you?
Mm, I think maybe that is part of it. The other thing is, I feel like, I don't know if this is a self judgment, but the way that she narrates, and I guess by extension, the way that Hank Green wrote her,
Hmm.
it feels very much how I would write my own book if I were to write a fiction book.
Mm,
And I think seeing that on the page is a little bit cringe, as I feel like reading your own writing is always a little bit cringe, or at least
mm.
in my history.
Interesting.
So I think part of it's like a self judgment, and I think for background, having been a very creative person who did want to pursue writing at one point
Mm,
and tried it, and still writes occasionally, but is I'm aware like reading John Green and just hearing John Green in his videos, it is very clear that he is very good with prose and words and making it sound poetic, and I
yeah.
know I can't do that.
Mm,
And this is, I can't say this is a judgment of Hank Green because I don't know if he can write that way, but the way that he wrote this book, an absolutely remarkable thing, it just feels like a literal projection of how I would end up writing a fiction book
I see.
in a
That's
very,
mhm,
very casual way.
yeah,
And that, I feel like, from the standpoint of someone who, I don't know, like wanted to be like a creative full time professionally and not getting there. I'm an engineer for background
mhm,
professionally. Um, I think it's a self judgment of like, oh, there's an expectation of, oh, good literature should read a certain way and
yeah,
like very flowy or fluffy and
mhm,
eloquent and poetic, and this isn't that.
yeah.
And I think I judge it for that because I judge
Interesting.
myself for that.
Yeah. Wow, that is actually so interesting to hear because I have a similar thought about this book, but I don't deduct points for it. Where I
Okay.
really I agree with you. I think the book does not have a certain kind of like poetic literary flourish that a lot of like
Mhm,
really good writers will have. Uh John Green has more of this, but even John Green is like very grounded in YA sensibilities, I feel like. So he doesn't like, I
mhm,
don't think he shows off to the extent that maybe he's capable of, or maybe that you expect from someone who like studies literature. Um,
mhm.
and I'm going to talk about myself now because I am also a writer and I'm almost done with my book.
Yes, please.
um, but what I have come to find over the years of working on this book is that I'm actually very flashy. I actually love doing the flourish. I love the poetic flourishes. Um, and part of that comes from the fact that I've read so much that, boy, I sound so conceited right now. I've read like a lot of different kinds of books. I've read YA stuff. I've read sort of like more modern, not quite YA, but like still like vernacular prose. I've read a lot of classics. I've read Shakespeare. I've read like translations of ancient Greek poetry. I've read other translations of ancient Greek poetry that I liked better than the other translations. I've seen so many ways in which words can be formed. And I've kind of found like my version of flourish, which is nice. It's a good feeling. And one of these days we'll get you there. I feel like that'll take some time, but we'll get you there. Um, but having that voice and having that kind of flourish, I think what I sort of come to believe over the course of doing all of this reading is that one kind of literary flourish, one kind of poetics is not intrinsically better than another, in my opinion. I think
Mhm,
that
mhm,
certainly I have a voice that is very grounded in, I guess I would say, like, uh, it comes from 19th century stylings of like very long, elaborate sentences with semicolons and subordinate clauses and things. But kind of like funneled through a little bit of modern sensibility where like it's still kind of legible. But like
mhm.
I got like a fucked up vocabulary. I use like the most insane words in all of my writing. Um, but all of this to
That's the best
say,
part.
it's fun. Yeah, it's like I gotta show it off at some point. Um, but all this to say that, like, I choose this because it feels right for me and it feels right for the book that I'm writing. But I also
Mhm,
have, like, written in other styles too. Like, I know that I'm capable of something that's a lot more minimalistic, something that, like, Ernest Hemingway might write, or William
mhm,
Zinsser, who is not, like, as very famous, but he is a journalist who wrote a book called On Writing Well that I highly recommend. It is kind of like my Bible for what good writing looks like. And so this is what I call the journalist tradition. So you've got Ernest Hemingway, you've got George Orwell, and you've got William Zinsser as sort of my anchor points. There's other great journalistic writers, of course, but journalism style is a lot more bare bones. It's not a lot of flourish. It's very functional. And the sort of magic of Ernest Hemingway is that he's able to take a very sparse, functional style like that, but turn it into great literature anyway, because at the end of the
mhm,
day, like literary flourish or poetic flourish is great and all, but what's really important and what you're really trying to do is channel like really lifelike and meaningful characters who experience things that people relate to, and in
mhm,
reading these character stories you understand something about yourself. That is the heart of literature, like I said
mhm,
at the beginning of the show.
mhm,
um,
mhm,
and I think there's a lot of ways to do that. I think being a 19th century Victorian poetic flourish person is one way to do that. But another way to do that is to be a journalist like Ernest Hemingway. Another way to do that is to
mhm,
be an avant garde abstract writer like Dikte, Teresa
mhm,
Hak Young Cha. I'll explain that later. Another way to do that
mhm,
is to write plays about that have like a lot of sex jokes in them, like Shakespeare did. Another way to do it is to
mm,
hand down stories over years and years and centuries, like the ancient bards in Greece did. And another way to do it is to channel like a 21st century vernacular that where like the characters like shout at each other in all caps all the time, and they use like internet slang
mm,
in weird places that don't really make sense.
mhm,
But it doesn't matter. Like all of this feels like there's like a kind of crass feeling to it almost, where it's like, this is not what literature is. Like, this isn't a literary book. But my position is that that doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be literary,
Mhm,
because the characters are
mhm,
lifelike and believable, and they feel and experience things that have meaning.
mhm.
And in reading these characters, you experience something beautiful that and your life is richer for it, and that's all you can really ask for from a book.
That's true. I can agree with that.
Yeah,
I think that is what matters the most
yeah,
about a book at the end of the day.
yes. Um, do you feel like that speech changes your relationship to the book at all, and perhaps to your own writing as well? Or are you just kind of processing
Mm,
that?
I think I'll have to process it, but I
Okay,
think it is helpful
we'll
perspective to hear for
we'll
sure.
revisit that. Yeah. Um, okay, we are an hour in. Now the spoiler hat is officially off. We can talk about anything now. Um, and
Let's do
so
it.
I here's the thing. Spoiler, real spoilers. This real spoiler territory. April May dies in this book, um, which is very interesting, because you don't, because narratively it doesn't quite make sense, because it's like, if she's dead, how is she telling us about this? Um, and it turns out there's a chapter where she talks to Carl finally, which is what we've wanted to see this entire time. Uh, and
Mhm.
we don't get great explanations for what's going on, but we do get enough to make a satisfying ending. Not everything is explained, but just enough is explained that you're like, yes, I got my narrative closure. But I do think the sort of like circumstances of her death, I think, are super interesting. Um, and so you have read the sequel to this book, right?
Mhm.
And
Mhm. I have, yes.
you,
A few years ago.
I have one question. I don't want you to tell me anything
Okay.
else, because I will be reading the sequel. Does April May come back?
Mhm. Yes.
Okay, so she will be back. So she's okay.
Yes.
So she's not like fully dead. The cliffhanger ending where she says knock knock, like, there is a way in which she manifests in the sequel, which is great news, because I love her as
Yes.
a character. Um,
Also, it's heavily implied that she's dead, but they never actually say that she's dead,
um,
for the record,
so
right?
okay, so
Am
textual,
I wrong?
all the other characters heavily imply maybe she's not really dead. When
Mhm.
she is talking about her own death, she does describe like a beam of wood going through her head. Uh,
I
and it
agree.
sounds like, well, she's pretty dead. But at the same
Yeah,
time, if she's still here to talk about it, how dead can she really be? Which is fun
exactly.
and
Yeah.
interesting. This is something,
Yeah, true. Okay.
it's so interesting, because the book, I almost feel like the book had to have been written with a sequel in mind already, because this is such like a weird ending, and it makes sense. It gives you the right amount of closure for this book, but at the same time it's like, I mean, clearly she's not dead. She's kind of come back at the end, where I can show the last
Mhm.
page. I think I can pull it up quickly. um
Yeah.
but she says,
I want to
yeah.
say,
Mhm.
yeah, if I can't remember for sure, but I feel like Hank Green has talked about his process
Yeah,
on Vlogbrothers, and I would be very surprised if he had not already thought about a sequel and he
yeah,
finished
of
this book.
course. Yeah. um And so, did I have a point when I started talking about this? Um,
Um,
I like the ending.
Death,
I
non-death, questionable
there's a
death.
lot that I could say about death. Um,
Hmm.
but okay. Here's okay. I'm going to talk about this from a craft perspective, I think, because I'm a writer.
Okay, sure.
I like analyzing novels from that perspective. Um,
Please.
I think that this book, wow. Let me start at the beginning. This is a sci-fi book. We're starting way back here. It's a sci-fi book, but it's also kind of a mystery. It's like, the
Hmm.
question is like, the Carls have shown up here. We're talking, the characters are like trying to figure out what they're doing, and the sort of like fundamental pull through this whole thing is like, what do the Carls want? What are the Carls, and what do they want? Um, and I find that so interesting, as like when I realized that this is a mystery as well as a sci-fi book, because
Hmm.
um here's how I would phrase it. Sci-fi is a setting, mystery is a plot. and those two things are not mutually incompatible. They're both genres of fiction, and I guess like a
Mhm.
mystery can be a setting too, with like it's a detective and a crime scene, and it's a murder mystery specifically. Um,
Mhm.
but I would say a mystery is just any book where like there is oh god, sorry. A mystery is any
Mhm.
book where there is a central question or attention that the entire book hinges on, and when that question is answered, the book kind of ends, if that makes sense. Like, if you're reading
Okay.
a murder mystery and you find out who the murderer is, you kind of don't have a reason to keep reading. You might keep
Mhm.
reading for the fun of it if you just like the characters, but if you're reading a mystery and you find out who the killer is halfway through the book and then there's more plot after that, you're kind of like, what am I doing here? Why am I still reading this? Why am I
Mhm.
still here?
Mhm.
And I feel like this book has a similar quality where like it's so interesting. You're so invested in finding out what the Carls are and why they're here and all these different things. Um, and you that's like the thing that keeps driving you forward when you're reading the book. And at the same time, like if you were to ever really find out, you would not have a reason to keep reading other than just liking the characters, I guess, which we do like the characters, of course.
Mhm.
But you understand, like from a construction standpoint, we can't know what the Carls are until the very end of the book. Um,
Mhm.
and specifically, like the circumstances around April's death, she gets to talk to Carl. Well, so spoiler alert, after she dies, she basically goes into a mini afterlife, which is a representation of another version of the dream, the shared dream that everyone is having. I didn't even explain the dream thing yet. We'll get back to that. Um, she
Mhm.
revisits the dream, the shared lucid dream that all of humanity is having, talks to Carl, and asks Carl, like, basically, what are you doing here? Um, and Carl just says, to observe. I think that's like the only
Mhm.
thing that he really says. And
Yeah.
April even asks like, I mean, what did you see? Did we pass the test? Do you like us, etc.? And uh Carl doesn't respond. And then April asks, rephrases the question and just says, well, what did you think of us? And Carl just says, beautiful. Um, and that is like basically the extent of what we know about Carl at the end of the book. And it's not a lot. It's not, we don't know what planet they came from. We don't know how they got here. We don't know how they made them float. We don't know what material this is made out of. We barely know anything about the Carls. But the thing that we
Mhm.
know is just enough. We know that they're here to observe, and we know that what they observed they thought was beautiful. Um, and that is a really, I think, skillful way. Sorry, I'm texting my friend. Sorry, I'm recording exclamation points. I'm so sorry. Um, that I think is a very skillful way to handle this, because the threat is basically that you over explain and you kind of kill the mystery. Um, so like
Mhm.
a way like it's like the more information we get about the Carls, the more the mystery becomes less mysterious and the less interesting the book becomes. It's kind of like,
Mhm.
did you ever see BBC Sherlock, Kelly? I feel like we've talked about this.
That's the one with Benedict Cumberbatch?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
And are you gonna yeah, go ahead.
Do you remember the cliffhanger ending of season 2?
No, I don't remember
Do you
details of TV shows or books very well.
That's okay. Do you remember how like Sherlock dies at the end of season 2 but then he didn't actually die?
Vaguely.
And do you remember how, like, for like years and years and years, people were speculating about how he managed to survive when it looks like he died, like he jumped off a building, etc.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
that's kind of the same effect here, where it's like the great mystery is how in God's name did he survive? We saw his body hit the floor, we saw them take him
Mhm.
away. How is he
Mhm.
alive? Um,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
like that sort of speculation fueled the fandom for years and years and years. And when finally season
Mm.
3 came out, they kind of like didn't tell us, if that makes sense. It's like um
Mhm.
the point, like the big line that John says that I actually still really like is, I don't care how you did it, Sherlock, I care about why. um which it, it's kind of stupid in the context of the show, because like Uh, I don't know. The whole show is fucking stupid. It's terrible. There's an H Bomber Guy video about this. It's an awful show. But this particular thing that he said, I think is actually a really good point and really impactful. It's like how he survived. No answer they could have given on the show would have been satisfying, because the whole mystique is that it's impossible. The whole point is that it's impossible for him to survive this. And once you say like, oh yeah, I guess it turns out that like he fucking threw a mannequin off the building and it hit at this angle and it was hidden behind this dumpster and all these different things, it's like seeing how a magic trick is done. It's like, oh well, that just kills the illusion for me. I liked it better when it was magic. And so I really like the structure of the ending of this book, because it has that effect of keeping the magic alive while giving just enough to be satisfying, where it's like, if you knew everything about the Carls, it would be like seeing how the magician did the trick. But by just knowing that they're here to observe and they thought we were beautiful, it's like you get just enough of a taste of the Carls to understand, like, to feel like we've reached a conclusion, but it's still mysterious enough that the book remains beautiful, you know?
Yeah, and I think going back to what you said about like John asking, why did you do it?
Mhm.
That's what I care about.
Yeah.
I think that is also a core, I guess, a core piece of it. It's like you can explain how you did something, but I think because of human curiosity, the last question is always going to be like, okay, but why?
Yeah. And why speaks to like a very deep psychological thing of like, what is a person's motivations? Why do they do the things that they do? What are they feeling that causes them to do these things? And it's like that is the key question that we want to know about the Carls this whole time. It's like how the Carls slash the one Carl, however you want to look at it, he's like a character in the book, kind of. But he's a character who is always present and arguably like the most important character of the book, and yet he never says anything and you never know how he feels. So as soon as you get even like a tiny sliver of how he feels and what he thinks, it kind of brings everything together, because like that's the why. That's the why of what we're doing here. He's here to appreciate the beauty of humanity in some ways. Yeah. So I have another question about the sequel, and I want you to be very vague in your answer because I want to enjoy it.
Okay,
But
okay.
uh how would you describe the nature? I assume the Carls are relevant in the sequel. How would you describe how Hank handles the sort of like return of the Carls, and like from this perspective of like trying to get to like the human motivation underneath things? How does it happen? Like how does he manage it? Do you like how it happened? Do you not like it? In very vague terms.
Based on what I can remember,
Hmm.
I enjoyed the book very much. I think it's a very different flavor from the first book in a lot of ways.
In what
It is
ways?
still culturally and societally relevant.
Hmm.
In a way, it's like same universe, same storyline, but also it starts out as a very different story, I think,
In what sense? What's
and
different
then
about it?
kind of different perspective, different
Oh, so like the main
plot.
character, like the narrator changes?
I believe so, if I remember correctly. Yes.
Okay. Do you remember anything about the Carls and like how they factor into the plot?
Yes, I do remember the Carls.
Okay.
Yes.
What what do we learn about the Carls in a very vague sense? Like, what do we begin to understand more about them?
Um. hmm. There's more than just one Carl, I guess,
Mm,
in a way, or like it's not. It is not a singular Carl.
mhm.
and they keep pushing at the idea of what is humanity, and
The simplified question of, is humanity inherently good or bad?
Hmm. Okay. That is
I think that is
that is kind of that
an
is
accurate
interesting.
summary from what
Yeah,
I remember.
interesting. That is the same question posited in my book, but the answer is very definitively humans are bad fundamentally. So that
Mm.
we'll come back to that. Um, what you said made me think about something else, which I
Mhm.
hope is in my notes. Ah, yes, the value of the value of having an other to compare humanity against. Um, so again, so okay, so what it sounds like to me is that the sequel deals with the question of, um, well, you said this literally. It's like, is humanity good or bad? Um, but more importantly, that means that we're still in the perspective of, or in the mode of analyzing humanity as a species with the help of a sort of outside observer to comment on it, which is also, I'm just going to talk about my book again because I like my book. Um, I also do this, but but in a different
Mhm.
way. In my case, the outside force that is commenting on humanity is an AI character named Cleo. The framing device is that my main character, Cassandra, is telling the events of the book to Cleo, and Cleo is interpreting them to understand humanity better. And at the end,
Mhm.
Cleo kind of like renders her final verdict of what she thinks of humanity as a whole. Um, I don't know what happens in the sequel, but I do know that that is a very interesting thing that I think is peculiar to sci-fi that I think is worth talking about. And again, I am going to start somewhere very far away and then come back to this. When I was in college, I took a class about translation and subjectivity. Basically, how impossible it is to translate a book from one language to another, because language has, how do I say this? The idea that there is a one-to-one correspondence from a word and concept and grammatical thing in one language to another is a fiction. There's no real like direct correlation. There's only like there's only approximations, and the approximations can only ever be so good, and et cetera, et cetera. Translation's hard, whatever. Uh,
Mhm.
and along the way of learning about this, I also learned about how the relationships between nations influences translation and also language. And there's a lot that I could talk about here, but the important part is that this is all centered on a conversation about um, Japan versus the West during the colonial period. So we're talking like 1850 to like 1930. The British occupy like half the countries in the world. The French occupy the other half. Uh, all of the European powers have carved up different parts of China, and are fighting over them basically. And all the other Asian countries are like, damn, we don't want us to go through what China just went through because that looks terrible.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
and so Japan, as the sort of the Japanese government of the time, sort of like began constructing like a cultural identity of being like the west of the east, if that makes sense. Like they wanted to be the
Yeah.
colonial power in the east in the same and have the same power and influence that the other western colonial powers had. um, and along the way, Japan started creating a lot of comparisons between itself and the West, where it's like the West is like this and we're like this, the West is like this and we're like this, etc., etc. um, and in doing so, it also tried to create something called like Japanese thought or Japanese culture, you could say, even. Um, and the point that my professor was making essentially is that it wasn't until the pressure from colonial Western powers that Japan started to sort of like coalesce onto this idea of like, what are we as a nation? Because prior to that point, Japan was like, I think just several different provinces scattered around that were just like loosely allied to each other. But then, like, as all this colonial stuff started going down, they were like, okay, this will all be better if we are one country. We are going to make ourselves one country for the sake of our safety. And the point that I'm trying to make, and we're finally coming back to the book here, is that oftentimes you don't really understand yourself until you have an other to compare against. So Japan didn't understand itself and arguably didn't even exist until there was an other for as a point of comparison. And in the same way, humanity, in a sense, as like a thing, there's no such thing as a global humanity unless there is an other for humanity to be against, you know? And that other has taken different forms over the years. So there's humanity against nature. There's like, we are one thing and nature is another thing, and we are like this and nature is like that, etc. There's also a religious angle to this, where like humans are different from angels and humans are also different from demons. Here are all of our differences. Fantasy is like this, where humans are one way, elves are another way, orcs are another way, dwarves are another way. And sci-fi is another manifestation of this, where a very particular kind, where I think the tropes of sci-fi are maybe a little bit less rigid than fantasy, but there is that same feeling of like we are comparing ourselves against an other. In this case, it's an alien life form. In my book's case, it's an AI. There has to be some kind of outside observer of humanity so that we can understand what humanity actually is. And that, I think, is the real value of sci-fi. Sci-fi is, I think, a uniquely well-equipped space to space pun, ha ha ha, so funny. Sci-fi is a uniquely equipped space to talk about questions like that, because I think it's the prospect, like angels and demons are one thing. It's like they're kind of real, they're kind of not. We can never really like see or touch God or anything like that. Same thing with fantasy. It's like we know there are not elves on Earth, but it's fun to make pretend sometimes. But sci-fi is interesting because there is a very, very actual, real possibility that there is intelligent alien life out there. We don't know for sure. We haven't found it yet, I don't think. But it actually can be a thing. Like, we can conceive of this, and it's a little bit scary. And I think forcing us to confront the possibility that there actually is an other, like that is so interesting because it leads to the sharpest, most meaningful insights about ourselves. And that's what I think an absolutely remarkable thing does so well. It forces us to confront these aspects of ourselves by pitting us against like an other, an alien, but in a way where the conversation is still like deeply, deeply focused on humanity.
I think that's very well said. That is a
Thank
very
you.
good observation.
Thank you. That took a long time for me to say all that. Um, yeah, that's a point that I wanted to make. How do you feel about that? Do you like
Um,
sci-fi as a genre, do you think?
I do like sci-fi.
Mhm.
I'm trying to think of like what other sci-fi books I've read because I mostly stuck with fantasy growing up.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Sci-fi I feel like is definitely very similar, but still different.
Hmm. What would you say is the comparison?
I think growing up, my impression was sci-fi is just similar in that it is a different world from the one in which we live in,
Hmm.
but in a theoretical sense could be made possible by technology
Yes.
advancements.
Hmm.
But I think a lot of the ones I read, it felt like those technological advancements were just so far off that I didn't think they would be possible or like
Yeah.
definitely not possible in the near future.
Hmm.
And so I think that's why I equated it to fantasy
Mm.
for the most part.
Yeah, I do think there's a
Whereas
comparison.
I feel like
Yeah.
fantasy is just like pure mythological creatures
Yeah.
and worlds.
I do think there's a comparison there of like sometimes sci-fi becomes so distant that it just kind of becomes fantasy. Like, I would say Star Wars is like this. It's the most famous sci-fi movie of all
Mm.
time, but
Mhm.
it's still like, in some ways it has more to do with fantasy than it does with like other sci-fi, because it's
Mhm.
so incredibly disconnected from the world as we know it that it's like,
Yeah.
what is the Death Star? Like, are we ever going to build that? Probably not. What does it mean for humanity? It's like, it's just a plot device. It's like, it's a very
Mhm.
fantasy-esque thing. um
Mm.
and we can contrast this with something like, boy, do I know any
Three body problem?
sci-fi? Sorry?
Three body problem?
Oh, that's a good one. Thank you. I actually read that book. Have you read that book?
Mhm.
Thank
I just finished the
thank
last book recently.
thank fucking God you reminded me that I read that book. I was about to run
It's
head
so
first. I
good.
was about to run head first into a brick wall, and you just quietly like picked up the brick wall and moved it out of my way. So thank you for that. Yeah.
You're very welcome.
So the three body problem is like also very sci-fi heavy. Oh, it's hard to
But
talk about
also
with,
very grounded in like
yeah.
physics.
It's hard to talk about without spoiling it. It is also a book
Yeah.
about how humanity would react to extraterrestrial life, more not from the perspective of internet fame, but more so from the perspective of like government and politics, like that scale of things. Um, but the point is that it's a book where you can actually draw a line from humanity as we know it today to the humanity as it exists in the book, which I think is,
Mhm.
I think sci-fi is better when it's like that. Because I
Mhm.
think here's like, again, here's like a critique of literature that I have
Okay.
held on to for a while. Um, I think I don't like it
Let's
when
hear it.
literature is too escapist. I don't like it when the
Mm.
point of the book is just to be transported to another world and just like have a fun, happy time for a little bit and then go back. I think that's boring.
Mhm.
Um, and I think especially, oh boy, there's a whole tangent I can go on about how this relates to queerness and stuff, but I'll save that for
Okay.
maybe another episode. But I think that the temptation to do that is a kind of almost like refusal to engage with reality and society that we as we know it, that I feel like does a disservice
Mm.
to a lot of people. Um and I get
Mm.
it. Like, life is hard. Sometimes you just want to do something fun to escape mindlessly. I have so many hours in League of Legends. It's like I can't say anything. Um but literature for me has always occupied a kind of different space from something like League of Legends or Solitaire or TikTok or whatever, where I'm like, I'm not here to stop feeling. I am here to confront those really difficult and interesting questions that are just really hard to come
Mm.
across in day-to-day life.
Mhm.
And so,
Mhm.
like, people who read for the sake of escapism, like, it's fine, you can do whatever you want, but I almost feel like ideologically against how they treat literature, because I see literature as a way to do the exact opposite. I see it as a way to grapple with questions and difficulties that are otherwise difficult to articulate and access in our everyday lives.
Mm. Mhm.
And this comes back around to the
I think
sci-fi. Oh,
that's
sorry, you go.
yeah. Mhm. I think it's definitely a very valuable part of literature,
Mhm.
but as someone, I think who grew up mostly reading, I mean, for school, but also for escapism, I think
Yeah.
there is space for both.
There was a shift for me, for sure, because I also used to be very escapist
Mm.
when I was younger. The
Mhm.
shift,
Mhm.
frankly, it probably happened when I got an English degree. That is probably
Yeah.
when the script flipped for me. That certainly
That is
informs a
fair.
lot of my, position. Um, but
Mhm.
yeah. So anyway, I really like this book because I think it does a good job of getting you to grapple with those questions while also being
Mhm.
like fun enough that it's kind of an escape from your day-to-day life. Uh, and
Mhm.
yeah, the
Yeah, I
last,
think
sorry, you
I
go.
really appreciated it.
Mhm.
Yeah, I really appreciated the book for like kind of what John and Hank Green do in general on their and all their YouTube videos on Vlogbrothers and just with their work
Mm-hmm.
in general, but just confronting a very real and big issue that no one really talks about or knows how to talk
Yeah.
about in an eloquent way. And I think that's really valuable.
Yeah. Like John Green has like his tuberculosis thing that he's doing now.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
like he the thing he said in one of his videos about like Leone, like he's coming back to me, is like, just don't look away. That's all I ask. Just don't look away, look it in the eye. Uh and that by itself is meaningful. And I think
Hmm.
literature is a way to stare something as difficult and complex as like the internet and how it's affected all of our brains. Like it's a way to confront that uh without looking away, without
Hmm.
like just kind of shying away from how difficult and complex that question is.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the last thing that I want to talk about is again kind of about my book, but also kind of not, which is sort of like, how do I say this? I think this book is really magical. I think, obviously, I mean, this is kind of the case for most books. It's like we're dealing with characters who are in the most important thing that has ever happened to them. It's not daily life, it's not just like, oh, I woke up and got coffee today. It's like my life has been changed so dramatically. In April's case, my life has
Hmm.
straight up ended as a result of everything that has happened. Um,
Hmm.
and that it's it's one thing to experience that over the course of like a few hours or like a couple of evenings. In my case, I started this book like last night, so I I read the whole thing in like less than 12 hours. Um,
That is
I
impressive.
I'm crazy. Uh, but it's one thing to spend like a relatively short amount of time with a book like this. From a personal perspective, something that I've been going through recently as I'm working on my book is that I have to live in that incredibly intense emotion just constantly. I've been in that period of my characters' lives for years now, uh, and like
Hmm.
constantly revisiting like these intense emotions over and over again. And I feel like in some way, like it's almost been like fucking with my sense of reality and like life in general, where it's like after spending like a few hours working on my book, where I'm immersed in such incredible and intense emotions, I then have to go back out into like my normal day-to-day life where it's like, oh, I lost my job last month, I need to like submit some job applications, or like, oh, I have to decide whether or not I'm going to renew my lease, or like I have to decide if I'm going to stay in Minnesota or move back to New York, and all these like just mundane day-to-day things. And
Hmm.
I like the book that I'm writing like occupies so much of my mental energy and bandwidth, and it's so emotionally intense that in some ways it's kind of hard for me to go back and be like, yeah, now I'm just back to like, going to my silly little legal assistant job and working at a law firm from 9 to 5. It's like, I
Hmm.
don't know. I don't really know how to navigate that. I think it's just something that I'm trying to figure out.
Mm. That's really interesting because I feel like I had that issue, but
Hmm.
as a reader
Yeah.
and growing up and reading fantasy novels and being fully immersed in that world to the point where, like, when I stopped reading, I would daydream and make up my own stories of, like,
Hmm.
oh, I am part of that world. This is what I'm doing with
Yeah.
the characters,
Hmm.
and always wishing that I could live in that reality instead of the reality that I was actually living.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
just like
Hmm.
having to grapple with that deep obsession with that other world that I cannot ever actually live in,
Hmm. Yeah.
and having to split my brain into like pairing it back into actual reality and
Yeah.
dealing with my life and dealing with college and all of that.
Hmm. That's how I feel too. Yeah. And I did the same thing growing up, of course, of like reading a book and getting
Hmm.
super immersed in it and just like disconnecting from my day-to-day life as a result. Um, and I've thought about this honestly from kind of like a spiritual angle almost, where like I'm like I'm like kind of Buddhist, if that makes sense. And like
Hmm.
I think like something that as my relationship with Buddhism has evolved over the years, which is the thing that we'll probably talk about in another episode. um
Hmm.
I think what I have sort of come to believe is that I kind of started to think of the human experience as being like a very subjective and finite part of a more global conscious experience, if that makes sense. Where
Hmm.
it's like humanity is one way that you can experience consciousness, but I think there's surely there must be other ways because humans are weird. Like we're so emotional and we do such irrational things all of the time. We're so like tied to our biology that it almost feels like it feels almost sacrilegious that like something so biological and base and like earthly is tied to something so like abstract and divine and as consciousness, like
Hmm.
it's they're such different things, and yet they're married in us as a species in such an irrevocable way. And we as humans who have never encountered a different kind of consciousness, we can't it's really hard for us to separate out like the experience of perceiving and understanding from the experience of being an emotional hormonal biological being, um
Hmm.
and I don't maybe it sounds crazy, but somehow somehow I have a feeling that literature is one of the ways we in which we are able to access kinds of consciousness that are not tethered to like hormonal normal biology stuff, it's like I feel like with books we're tapping into something that is bigger than that. Um, and
Hmm.
in some ways, it kind of makes my regular life feel small. Where it's just hard for me to care about finding a new job when like things like this can exist, when books can exist,
Hmm.
and I as a writer also like when I have the option to create something like that. Like, why does any of this other stuff matter when that's available to me?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, I feel like I can relate to that in the sense of, yeah, like there's so much more to the world than
And just the things that
everyday
we see.
existence
Yeah.
and survival.
Hmm. Every now and then something comes along that touches something inside of you that makes you think that there must be more than just day-to-day life. And I feel like this book is
Exactly.
that for me. So 10 out of 10,
Yeah. Hmm.
like I said.
Hmm.
Okay. I think we're done. I think
Okay.
we've talked for an hour and 39 minutes, which is pretty good. Um,
That is impressive.
yeah. All right. Thank you so much for watching the first episode of the Starlight Book Club. Yay! We did it. We got through it.
Woo! We
Uh,
did it.
I think we said we want to read tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow for our next book. Is that right?
Yes, that is
Yes.
correct.
And so, for a little bit of context, this was my first time reading An Absolutely Remarkable Thing. This was Kelly's second time reading it. And now we're doing the
Mhm.
opposite. I've already read Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow and really loved it, but this will be Kelly's first time reading it. So, we'll have the
Yes,
opposite perspective of what we did for
indeed.
this episode.
Hmm.
All right.
Do you want to consider doing kind of what I did in terms of trying the audiobook as your
Um,
second read and seeing what you think about it?
that's a good question. I'm gonna say no
I didn't.
because
Okay, that's fair.
part of what I'm going to do on this pass is I'm going to do the notes thing again, where I like
Mm.
try to take notes and take pictures of
Mhm.
interesting passages and stuff. So we
Yeah,
we
makes
have
sense.
this is the end now, so we can just kind of ramble a bit. We have just
Mhm.
like a whole mountain of like pictures and screenshots of the book that we've stacked up here.
Yeah.
I didn't look at any of this when we were
Yeah.
recording. I just started talking.
I read most of yours,
Mhm.
but I missed the first
That's
one.
okay. The first one was insane. Don't bother with that. I guess it's valuable just to
Okay.
produce it and write it down somewhere, and then like if we
Yeah.
look at it, it doesn't matter as long as we know like the themes that are going to be accessed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Anyway,
was
oh sorry,
gonna
go on.
use Post-it notes, but I don't have access to Post-it notes right now, and I'm using library books, so that'll be a
Mayo.
pain.
Yeah.
But
Well, anyway, next episode we will be talking about tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow, and we might even use passages from the book, which is what we wanted to do for this episode, but then we didn't, and that's okay.
we'll have a better plan next time.
Hopefully. All
When we
right.
figure out how to do this podcast.
Mayo. Okay. Goodbye, everybody. Kelly, you have to say goodbye too.
Oh, bye.
Bye
I hate
bye.
goodbyes. Bye,
Well,
guys.
see you next time. That's a little bit better.
See you next time. Indeed.
Wee.